Please note that in this video, I put captions on the screen while I read Atsuro Riley's poetry. However, these captions are only to impart to you the words I'm saying. They in no way represent the layout of the words on the pages as Riley intended them. They don't have the line breaks, they don't have the spacing. For all of my talk in this video about the sound of his poetry, it is also a visual work of art. The layout of the words on the page are as important as the way it sounds. Our kitchen floor linoleum is pocked some and pitted, swollen in a few places, and mostly off pink as a leg. Dawn is cracking, and Mama's fingering flour in a bowl. Blisters cluster over there by the sink, owing to floor slope and pipe seep, and spring steady trickling. A mildew map will sprout and spread and blacken there by noon. Now she's working the lard in and dribbling clabber from a jug. Down here up close, I can study where gouges have been dug by the hard rain of hot dropped or thrown skillets. That one's a raggedy rabbit's foot, same as Florida. This fresh one could be a teepee, or Fuji, seething, or a neat cut wedge of pie. Heat is rising, knocking and popping in the stove. Sometimes I nerve hover, hand-sized, square to square, nicknaming and mind-mapping every burn mark and blemish. Starfish, Utah, PD River, Africa, amoeba, mole-mound, quail. Mama's palm patting and smoothing a belly white, bob white, swole of dough. Hey everybody, thank you as always for watching Leaf by Leaf. Today, I am happy to talk about Atsuro Riley, his first collection of poetry called Romey's Order, and his second collection of poetry, Heard-Hoard. These poems were published with about 10 years in between, but both of them are interrelated. In fact, they're connected in many ways. First and foremost, by sound, by the sonic property of language, spoken language, verse, poetry. As I've said many times over the last year or so, I plan to start getting more poetry incorporated in the channel. So here we go with the first poetry of 2022. And I'm so happy that it's on Atsuro Riley because these two collections of poetry are very, very striking. There is a quality to them that makes me want to clasp the books to my chest and keep them with me at all times like a security blanket. It also makes me want to just chant the poems aloud. I've heard this many times over the years, this suggestion to read poetry out loud as it was intended to be read. And you will find yourself wanting to go and get lost in the woods somewhere with these poems, just reading them out loud. Just as reading books on fiction writing will make you a better reader because of the insight it gives you into what goes into the craft, so too with poetry. So I picked up Mary Oliver's succinct little handbook for understanding and writing poetry. And regarding the sounds of words and the sounds down even at the phoneme level, she says, our working material, the alphabet, represents families of sounds rather than random sounds. Here are mutes, liquids, aspirates, vowels, semivowels, and consonants. Now we see that words have not only a definition and possibly a connotation, but also a felt quality of their own kind of sound. And to be sure, this is where Riley shines. You will chant these out loud. You will see that the words are so rich in their felt property that as you speak them out loud, you will not only receive images into your mind, but you'll actually feel them pressed into your mind. As Hart Crane said, the mind brushed by sparrows' wings. Riley is contriving an ordering of language to best convey an experience. And so in Romey's Order, his first collection, we are concerned with a young boy in the low country of South Carolina who is both at home and alien to this milieu. He's half Asian, and so always an outsider. And there are resonant, powerful images to convey this otherness that he feels in the place of his birth. It's a great title because giving order to his words, giving order to language, ordering words, is a way of ordering reality. This is from the poem Object. If she was a baby doll type, the kind that talks and whimpers, I would pull on her speech string until it was frayed, good, and gray greasy. I would bend down and press my ear against the speaker holes in her body's probably pink plastic, the way a doctor would check your chest for heart sounds, the way a landlocked child might listen for live ocean in a shell. In other words, even with this image of a child and a toy, it's the sounds of the toy that he wants to investigate. Riley not only creates poem after poem, line after line of beautiful sounding poetry, but he picks sounds that so perfectly fit with his rural setting. There's an earthiness and a southern drawl to these words. Splacked, pluff, smutch, skinks, turn turbulating, crubble, carks, planging, crudel, and grubble. You get the vernacular of this southern low country. And raise them biscuits big for sopping. Of a menu at a restaurant or diner, we see keen pipit, snap beans, pot beans, sweet potato shoes, collard bills in hock stock, hoppin' john, and okra stew, cabbage pie, simbling fry, Crowder peas and cream, cornbread, tea-glassed, buttermilked, streak of lean, and creasy greens. Riley is also sharing this vibrant and rich diction, a heritage of a way of life with us through these poems. One way to describe the experience of reading Atsuro Riley's poems is to think about how sometimes we find ourselves burning or this yearning to convey our qualia, as the philosophers call it, to another person. So the experience of what something's like, to take Antonio Damasio's definition of qualia. So when we see the color red, this feeling of what it's like to see the color red. Think about Proust's involuntary memory, where the taste of the lime blossom tea in the Madeleine calls up this cyclone of memories that is very subjectively resonant. And he spends, over 3,000 pages trying to capture that and leave it for us. It's a difficult thing, but I believe that Riley has succeeded in capturing things that you can tell are at once very dear to him, but become also dear to you vicariously or via analogy to something that it'll spark from your own life. Romey's order starts off with Flint Chant. And I love Flint Chant because right here in the very first title, we get something that Riley loves, and that is this hyphenated combination of words or sounds. Usually it becomes a construction of that of a dactyl, these hyphenated dactyls, and they really give punch and pizzazz to his lines. Also, flint is one of the things used to spark a fire or to get something going, so it seems fitting. And then a chant is like this repetition or this incantation, and that's another form that you'll see a lot in here. So this is the Flint Chant. Once upon a time, a ditchpipe got left behind Azalea Industrial, back in the woods backing on to the Ashley, where old pitch pines and loblollies grow wild. A mild pesticide-mist was falling and mingling with paper mill smell and creosote oil the morning he found it. The boy shook and sheltered in its mouth a while. Hoo-hoo, hey-yo, and bent and went on in it. It was like a cave but clean. He C-curved his spine against one wall to fit, and humming something, sucked his shirt tail. He tuned his eyes to what low light there was and knuckle-drummed a line along his legs. What the boy called inside-oku called him back. He was hooked right quick on the well-bottomed piece of the pumicy concrete and how sounds sounded in there and resounded. Tight curled as he had to get, like a clean shrimp one day, a pill bug, a bass-clef, a bison's eye, an abalone, ocean ear, antler arc ant, apostrophe another. Sure as clocks a cool, clear under creek would rise and rinse him through and runnel free. Hanging in a green pine outside, where sun heat and smaze and BB fire and mosquito abatement. Inside there were water limber words and picture noisy knave, shades of shade. And there's a lot that can instruct us in the goodness of Riley's poetry, just in this very first poem. Again, like I said, that Flint chant from the title, the chant, think of repetition and incantation, and there's so much repetition going on. In the first line, we've got behind, the same word repeated, and then back in the woods, backing onto the Ashley. It ends with shades of shade. But then we've got this beautiful consonance that you probably picked up on towards the end where he says, sure as clocks a cool, clear under creek. Also that image of him C-curving his spine against one wall. Remember, this is a ditch pipe. So this young boy, Romey, has gotten in there and he's against one wall of it. And so it's just big enough to allow him to enter, but not big enough for him to stand upright. And, this is also a beautiful detail to get a sense of the youth, of the innocence, and perhaps him sucking on that shirttail gives you a sense of maybe his level of manners and a way of life here in this low country, South Carolina. In the next poem, picture these compound adjectives and compound adverbs, usually in a dactyl form, come up again and again. This is the house and jungle strangled yard I come from and carry. The air out here is supper singed and bruise tinging. I can belly worry. I can hunker turn. Our roof is crimp-ribbed. Our in-warped wooden porch door is kick-scarred and splintering. The hinges of it rust cry and rasp in time with every tailspin wind and jam slap and after slap and shudder. There's a quick silver blade flash plus the magma-brimming ladle-splash. And so there's a lot of internal rhyming going on and a lot of slant rhyming too with blade flash and ladle-splash. In this poem, there's also his use of parataxis, which is just tacking on things, using and usually, and this, and this, and this, as opposed to hypotaxis, which would be subordinate clauses. Here, they aren't subordinate to anything. They're just constant thoughts or images tacked on. Here's an example of that parataxis. Trolling and trawling and crawfishing and crabbing and bass boating and trestle jumping bear into rust brackish water and cane poling for bream and shallow gigging too with a nail-pointy broomstick and creek shrimping and cooler dragging and coon chasing and dove dogging and duck bagging and squirrel tailing and tail hankering and hard cranking and shifting and backfiring like a gun. Here's a line that gets at that feeling of otherness and foreignness and alienation even in his hometown. Gaggles and clutches of feather-white neighbor women eyeballing us like we're pig's feet in a jar. In the poem called Roses, there are two dactyl compounds that echo each other across two different stanzas. So the first one was clambermire, and then it's echoed and rhymed in the next stanza with tractor tire. Listen to this balance of plosives and fricatives. Preserving fiddle crabs, pock-working the pluff mud. So you hear those P's of the plosives and those F's of the fricatives. Preserving fiddle crabs, pock-working the pluff mud. Like I said, Heard-Hoard is his latest. Both of these are out, by the way, from the University of Chicago press. And this was the one that I read first. I heard this on Bookworm, and I heard Atsuro Riley read his poem Sunder, and I fell in love with it. I bought the book immediately and then bought Romey's Order. So I've read this one through a few times. In this one, just as the title conveys, and again, we get that glimpse into Riley's love of that compound word using a hyphen. He loves joining. And right from the title, Heard-Hoard. So in this one, he's been hoarding all of these herds or things that he's heard. There's so many novel words, again, that encourage a southern drawl. Were-balded, gully, lured and drawn, gnawed, fank, yowl, grubbled, womped, scrimp, scritches, scrablets, runched, guttle, pleached, dunt, carking, scrawlers. There's so much potent imagery in addition to this stabbing and arresting sound. Veritable thought-thick trunks of swampfoot oaks. Of a tree's roots, we get, he veins the bank. Sunder has a stanza that says, Lord, the sound such as rose from him carried so, carved into us, clings. This is such a great way of conveying the notion that sounds, that combinations of sounds can carry and they can carve into us, the listeners, the readers, and they can cling to us, attach themselves to us. There's also an incredible compression of thought that Riley can capture here in just 4 lines that get successively shorter. This is from the chorus called Hankerer. Had it had good tang to it, or even a cell of succulence, he'd have squirreled the day away to paw and tongue. At one point, there's a line that says, let articulated scapes rise. And certainly, Riley is indeed raising articulated wordscapes, soundscapes, and imagescapes in these 2 books. In the poem Shed, we have a line that has a verb, an article, and then a compound adjective noun. But then later, we have this compound of adverb, verb, article, noun. And the way he modulates these 2 type of line structures to kind of give this internal agreement. This is across 4 different stanzas. I'll just read the first stanza in which one structure appears, then the 2 stanzas in between, and then that next structure. And I'll point out where they're shaking hands with one another. Beat a rhythm rain of brunts with oar and haft. Gagged raw wallboards, gaps and cracks, with chigger moss, with oyster sacks. Would some nights leak a howl, rough-rigged a roof, some type of a sail from linoleum, scrimp, and plastic. And so the 2 lines that I'm talking about are beat a rhythm rain and rough-rigged a roof. So in the first one, we've got this verb, article, and then compound, adjective, noun. And in the second line, we have that compound where we have adverb, verb, article, noun. It's really just beautifully written lines. I feel I could go on and on about the poetry of Atsuro Riley, but I'll go ahead and stop myself. Please, please don't miss out on this beautiful, beautiful experience of language.